Hey, so I gotta do a 2-minute video, or more than 2 minutes, on this, basically mocking American culture for my intercultural communications class. I'm a little sick right now, so if I cough throughout the video, you know why. But, you know, it's the last day to do it, so I gotta get it done. You know what I mean? Alright, so ignore the background noise, please. My sister's a dumb idiot and has people over. But anyways, I thought the article was very funny. It's very satirical in nature, obviously. It's not really meant to be taken seriously, but in some ways it is. I mean, it does critique, like, the American healthcare system and how Americans kind of view each other and how Americans kind of interact with each other, right? I mean, it's very much like how we create our own holes and we fill up those own holes with our solutions, but a lot of times those solutions really aren't as good as they could be, or they're more surface level solutions for a long-term problem. I thought it was a very interesting and satirical take on American culture, and I thought it was very funny. My next thing that I need to talk about is take 2 minutes to describe a communication pattern, practice, or ritual or event in your culture that might be seen from the outside observer. Basically, as in the same format as the article. And I'm going to take lobbying because it wasn't mentioned, but it's very much still there in terms of, the monetary value from like the doctors in order to get the help that you need, right? And if you don't know what lobbying is, it's basically where big corporations, for the most part, or people with large amounts of money, basically, the nice way of putting it is they give money to certain politicians so they help them with policies that will help the lobbyists get what they want. The biggest lobbyist group in America is the NRA. For obvious reasons, since we have so much gun violence, there's usually a lot of pushback on that, but nothing ever gets done, and people don't know why. It's because the NRA is the biggest group of lobbyists that we have in America, because there's a lot of money in guns, right? And so there's a lot of money in that particular aspect. But I mean, obviously, kind of how it would be seen in the eyes of the article would be like, even though that these tribes always have issues with spear violence and bows, there's certain groups in the tribe higher-ups that work within those spear and bow or manufacturers, and so they give large sums of valuable jewels and gems to the higher ups and the chieftains, so they do not actually do anything about the growing concerns and issues of bow and spear violence. I mean, you got the Second Amendment, right? Which is, because for my number 3, I need to spend 1 to 2 minutes describing how this pattern has changed throughout history. I mean, back when we all had muskets and whatnot, it made sense why the founding fathers were like, hey, everyone should have access to the same firearms, because of the fact that, in case the government becomes an issue, you need to be able to overthrow them. And how to overthrow the government? You have the same firepower as the government. The issue, of course, nowadays is that that's just not the case. We don't have the same weaponry and whatnot as the military, because I don't think civilians should have access to what we have, because technology has advanced so far. I mean, humanity's greatest asset is the fact that we can always figure out a new way to blow each other up and do it in a giant violent spectacle. I think it's important to realize that lobbying has gotten more and more over time as well, right? For a long time, there was a lot of pushback against lobbying, but a lot of those just policies and whatnot over time just changed, and it became more and more positive for lobbying. I think it's important to realize that that's because some of the presidents who had issues with it had more important problems, like the Cold War and stuff they couldn't deal with. And you had JFK, who had a lot of pushback against monopolies, and he was shot in the head, right? So there was a certain amount of like, ooh. And I don't think JFK was shot by corporations, but I think there's a certain level of fear that came with it, just because of the fact he was shot in the head, and like, oh, this is what he cared about, and because of that he was killed. So there's a certain amount of fear to it too, right? And just how American governments over time, anything over time, if it's just not in check, it can become more and more corrupt if you aren't careful. That's one of the main concerns. For my final thing here, I need to spend 1 to 2 minutes briefly sharing my evaluation of these changes and how they've been detrimental or beneficial to U.S. culture. I think personally they've been detrimental. I think if you have more corporation, I think in a world where money is the most important aspect of a culture, and you give places that have the most amount of money, they're going to do what they can to keep that money. I mean, that would make sense. If you have something of immense value, why would you give that up? It wouldn't make sense to me. So then you have, large amounts of corporations lobbying for, tax cuts and whatnot. I mean, this is from NPR. And it said companies spent record-breaking funds on lobbying the 2024 General Assembly. So I think it's important to realize that, this is probably just going to get worse, especially with the current administration, right? I mean, it's one of the main people in there is a foreign billionaire. I mean, say what you want, but that kind of shows to me that, money is power, and especially in governments where that's one of the most important things. Obviously, you're going to be able to do stuff with that. Obviously, this is my opinion. It could be jaded, it could be wrong, but I'm supposed to share my opinion on the matter, and this is what I think. I think lobbying in America has been detrimental since the beginning, and I think it's done way more harm than good. And I'm sure there has been some reports of good. I just don't know them off the top of my head. I've seen a lot more bad than good when it comes to this particular aspect of American culture and American ideas, right? I mean, nowhere else can you really buy politicians. I mean, you can, but I don't think it's just as legally acceptable as it is in America, which I think says a lot about how much we care about money.